Hi everybody, this is Anna, and guess what? I just got home. Yes ma'am, I just got home from the Chubby concert over in Florence, Oregon. And I want to tell you what, for a man to be 70 years old, he's a young looking 70, and he has got energetic, he is a very energetic 70-year-old. Well, you just wouldn't believe that, he's 70 years old. And guess what? Today is October the 22nd, 2011, and they let it go, announced tonight, that 50 years ago, this is his anniversary date, that he appeared October the 22nd of 1961 on Ed Sullivan's show. Isn't that wonderful? It's been 50 years, so he was celebrating that anniversary part. So anyway, he was a very magnificent performer, and he performed for an hour and a half, and he had no let up. No one else was there. It was entirely his show. And he interacted with the crowd, and he is such a wonderful performer. Also, he showed us that he had the country side of him, and he sang country and his entire disposition and his voice and everything sort of changed when he sang this country song. And he was magnificent, and he sounded like a country singer. But he prefers the rock and roll and the faster tunes. And he sang some of Fats Domino songs, which is Blueberry Hill, and that was just absolutely gorgeous. And he sang Blue Suede Shoes, which Elvis sang it, but he wasn't the first one that sang it. And my husband knows exactly who came out with that first, but it wasn't Elvis. And but he sang a lot. And then I learned something. Now, I'd heard of the Hucklebuck song, and I told Ronnie, I said, and he said, well, I do too. I remember the Hucklebuck. Well, it went back for years and years and years, the Hucklebuck. And he announced that he wrote the Hucklebuck and that it's a dance like the twist. And he was going to bring the Hucklebuck. And it was in the 60s. And like he said, no way. They dismissed the Hucklebuck from the stations and would not allow him to perform the Hucklebuck. For the very simple reason, like he said, it was too nasty. But he says, you take 2011, anything goes, and nothing is too nasty. And he says, I really don't think it was that nasty compared to things of today. So he says, now we can do the Hucklebuck. So he said, and it's a dance. I didn't realize now when I've heard the Hucklebuck that it was a dance that he would try to get started. But he says, if you'll follow along, it will describe, let's do the twist, and it tells you how to do the twist. Well, all right, this one tells you how to do the Hucklebuck. And to do the Hucklebuck, you squeeze your buns up tight, and you put your legs out, and you bend your knees slightly, and you let your derriere and your spine, and what it is, it's like the humping motion. I couldn't get up and show you, but it's a humping motion. And he started doing that. Then he was saying, and he did that, and he sang, and everybody just went crazy over him and doing that. And then he says, I wonder if we've got anybody in the audience that can do the Hucklebuck now. And so, anyway, there was a few women that was trying to do it out there on the floor, and he kept looking and looking. Finally, he found this blonde. He says, "You, honey, you come up here." And he got her on stage. And Lord God, he says, "All right, don't you do it till we start in and the music starts. And when I tap you on the shoulder, you do the hucklebuck." And he says, "All right, men, pop your eyeballs back in your head," because he says, "I'm going to stand and watch. I'm going to enjoy." Man, oh howdy. Ooh, golly. Talk about the action and the hip action. And back and forth so fast. She had it. It was funny. Then, before the evening was over, he says, "Where's the men? I want the men. I just want the men." And he says, "We're going to see how you do the twist." And he says, "I want the men." Well, there's about a dozen men that came up the aisle, and everybody went up the aisle. He put them on the stage. There's old guys in the suspenders, and there was other younger guys, and there was guys in their 40s probably. But there was really some that was maybe in their 60s or so. I don't think there was any of them in the 70s or over, but they had to be in their 60s and 50s. But then there was this young guy that went up. He must have been 21, 22 years old. And he was doing the twist. And I mean, he twisted like this. And he went clear down to the floor twisting. And then he'd come back up. And then he'd go down to the floor and he'd come back up again. Well, none of these older guys, well, they just didn't have the strength or the power. But they was twisted. And there was the funniest thing. And one old guy tried to leave the stage. And he grabbed his arm. He says, "I didn't tell you to get off yet." He says, "You got to do the twist here by yourself." And he says, "You're going to have to turn your back to the audience when you do the twist." In other words, he was showing everybody the rear as they was doing the twist. It was hilarious. There was a lot of fun. And he came out in tight jeans. For a 70-year-old to wear the jeans as tight as he had his jeans. And he had just a nice little shirt on, and then he had a denim jacket on. That's all. He was plain. And his jeans was kind of faded out. There wasn't anything real fantastic about it. But, I mean, his performance, though. I mean, we really, really enjoyed his performance. And then again, he says, "I've got to tell this story." He says, "I was with a band, and it was with me for years and years and years." And he says, 5 or 6 months ago, I understood that I was going to come to a little town of Florence, Oregon, out on the West Coast. He said, "I have never been to the West Coast." Now, over the years that he's performed, isn't that odd? I thought it was. But he said he's always played in Louisiana, in the South, and New York, and in the northern states, and, in the eastern states back there, and, in Philadelphia and things like that. So he said to his band, he says, "All right, we're going to Florence, Oregon. That's way out west, right on the Pacific Ocean." And he says, "And you know what I think? I think that I want to go with all of you people and all of the band here. I want you all to go with me, and we're going to drive. And we're going to take our time and see what is between here and the West Coast. And after we get out there, I want to see the West Coast. I've never done this before in my life. I've always flew. Everywhere we went, we've always flown. And we've always did our performances or whatever, and then back home we go. Never got to see the country. So I want to really, really, truly enjoy this trip and enjoy the countryside and everything." And he says, "I've looked into the flying, and it's going to cost over $4,000 for us to fly out there the day before and get to Florence, and then to come back the next day. Over $4,000. And he says, "I don't want to do that. I want to drive, and I want to see the country. And on the way, I want everybody with me. I want them to enjoy the trip too. and we will make little side trips. And his band says no. He says, what do you mean no? They says, we mean no. He says, you don't want to go with your Chubby and enjoy a few days and several days of seeing the United States and the West and seeing what it offers and the people and the sides show, off to the side to see things. We've never done this. I mean, I want to have a fantastic trip. So we're going to do that. And they said no. He says, you can go, but we're going to fly. Well, he said, that didn't sit well with me. So he says, I got in on my knees like I have several times before, and I started praying to the Lord. And he says, I want you to send me someone that can go with me and be beside me and enjoy the trip and enjoy the things that would really like to go with Chubby. Here, I'm Chubby talking to you. And he says, I've really talked to the Lord. And he says, lo and behold, I was beginning to almost give up on things. But then lo and behold, 5 weeks ago, he says, meet the Wildcats, my new band, the Wildcats. And he says, aren't they fantastic? Well, I'll tell you what, he let the saxophone player come up and do his job, and he let the really one get up and do their job and everything. And he introduced all the band. He'd already done that before he ever told the story. But he says, but aren't they fantastic? He says, I'm so glad that I've got my new band, the Wildcats. Well, now I wonder what his other band thinks about that. They sure lost him a good job, didn't they? I guess they'll listen to Chubby from now on. But he's got a good band now. It was fantastic. Not only was he fantastic, but the band was also fantastic. And that's all I got to say about his whole show. He's fantastic. And, he'd sing and he'd have the audience a singing and everything else. Well, that's just exactly what I want to tell you about the Chubby concert. And these are just some of the pointers that come out. But the songs that he sang and the way the people, he had them a-clapping and swaying back and forth. I mean, he was just, well, I can't say enough about him. And even my husband said that if he came next week, he'd go and pay and see him again. And if he come back to the West Coast, which is his first time, he may never make another trip. But one thing about it, he did it he drove. I don't know whether he didn't say whether they drove a bus or how they come, but they did drive. So I just assume that maybe they had a great big bus or a couple of buses or so that brought them across and went to the side trips and seeing everything. And he said he wasn't through looking at the West Coast yet. So he may stick around up and down the West Coast for a couple of 3 days before he heads home. Who knows? And when he heads home, he may take his time to see things that he didn't see on the way out. Well, anyway, but I mean, he was just, like I said, fantastic. And I would go see him in a heartbeat. And of all the shows and things that I've seen, he is one of the best. Now, my husband said, no, when the Blue Brothers came, he really enjoyed them. And he said now he doesn't know which we would put on top and which would be on second. He said, I think they're just about even in my book. But if the Blue Brothers ever come back, my husband said he definitely is going to see them again. So that is my story about what Chubby Checkers and his concert tonight. We really enjoyed it. And if you have a chance to go and see Chubby Checkers' show, you will really miss out if you don't go. So I'm going to say good night to you all, and God bless everyone. Bye now.